Alright, damn, we're finally here, finally doing a little comic book review. Alright, let's get into it. I've had this one book on the shelf for years and years and years, right? And I just never got around to reading it until the past 2 months. And that book is The Amazing Spider-Man by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. Finally got around to reading this bad boy. Now, this here comprises Amazing Fantasy 15, The Amazing Spider-Man 1 to 38, Annuals 1 to 2, Strange Tales Annual number 2, and the Fantastic Four Annual number 1. But it's barely got that annual in there. The full annual's actually in the Fantastic Four Omnibus I got over there. It just includes like a little extra with Spider-Man and Doctor Doom in there. Now this is an interesting little book. Look at the front cover there. Look, you can see Spider-Man. Sorry, it's a little bit shiny. You can see Spider-Man there carrying a little crook. Got the Amazing Fantasy 15 cover right there, you can see. There's the spine. Nothing too imaginative on the spine. Yeah, these classic Omnibus from Marvel. Not too creative on the packaging details. And then the back there, you can see all those covers. Except, you know what's really disappointing about this? Where's the cover for... I know it's on the front, like obviously, but where's the cover for Amazing Fantasy 15 on here? They just kickstart the back with bloody Amazing Spider-Man number 1. Where I want to see Amazing Fantasy... I know it ruins the whole thing of the grid. It's perfectly aligned and everything. But stuff it. I want to see the cover for Amazing Fantasy 15 on there. Disappointing, Marvel. Now, this is a very interesting book. I have opinions on it. And they're not entirely glowing opinions. I know most people do have glowing opinions of the Stan Lee, Steve Ditko Amazing Spider-Man. I don't think it's perfect. Sue me. My main opinion that I've got... very strange. How the hell do you have something that's both timeless and incredibly aged at the same time? I have no idea how you have that, but anyway, it's been perfectly achieved in this book. These stories are classic, they're timeless. I'll be able to read these in 100 years. I'm not going to be alive, but if I was, I'd be able to read them and they'd still be enjoyable. But at the same time, these stories are 60 bloody years old. 60 years old, and you can feel it. Oh, you can feel it. From the language that's used, from the visual style. I mean, obviously you're going to have comics from the 60s. It's going to be the old visual style. Let me open up a page so I can show you what we got. Let's open a random page and hope that it's nothing but... Oh, that's a good page. Holy. Look at this full page spread of Spider-Man fighting Mysterio. That is dank right there. Holy shit. Do you see that? Full page in 1960 whatever. That's crazy. Anyway... so you can see the art here is actually pretty good, right? Like, look at that. That's kind of timeless, right? That's nice. Ditko actually does some very nice artwork. But compared to anything that's been coming out since I feel like the 80s was really when comic books started, like, you know, getting better and better and better with art quality and much more realistic and everything. Compared to even stuff from the 80s, which is still 40 years ago, this definitely feels old. Now, whether or not you're going to like that is going to be depending on you and how classic you like things. Personally, I'm an 80s and newer guy, but this definitely still has its charms. It's not as bad as like your golden age, like Batman and Superman and all that. It's definitely more presentable than that. And Steve Ditko actually has like a pretty realistic style when it comes to 1960s humans. Like, I'll open up this page here. Have a look at that. See those people? God, they're bloody ugly, aren't they? You see that? It's not the worst. It's not as bad as a lot of other artists from the 60s. So if you can't stomach the 60s style, you might still like this. But there is the chance that you're going to read it and you're just going to think it's ugly as hell. Now, if I had to break this down into chunks to talk about, I'd probably break it down into thirds. You can see there's like 2 rows there, 2 rows there, and 2 rows there. And I think that actually makes a very good distinction in the eras of this original Spider-Man run. I was surprised to learn that Steve Ditko was only on the first 38 issues. By the way, I thought he was on for way longer than that, but apparently it's going to shift over to John Romita Sr. I know Stan Lee stayed on the book for like 120 issues, but Ditko only being on 38, like damn, he really left a mark on that character and mythos, didn't he? Now the first third of it pretty much goes, let me see if I can read that, until about issue 12. And I will say that, like, Amazing Fantasy 15 and Spider-Man issues 1 to 12 have probably aged the worst. I do think that's the portion of the book that is a little bit hard for me to read. The rest of it's fine. The rest of it's actually very enjoyable. And even if you're not into the old stuff, you can still read and enjoy that. But the first third of it is a little bit painful. It's starting out with they didn't really know where the comic was going. The first couple issues are very, very messy in terms of the villains, in terms of what Spidey's doing, who Peter Parker is as a character. Now, if you're watching this video, you know who Spider-Man is. You know about Peter Parker. You know about Spider-Man. Otherwise, you wouldn't be clicking on this video. So I don't really need to explain that. I will, however, go into some of the characters that are a little bit more prominent in this book compared to what I was expecting. Now, for the first third of the book, you're pretty much just dealing with Pete and Aunt May. They're really, and J. Jonah Jameson, they're really like the three main characters that are in this first third. The artwork is a little more rough. The coloring's not as vibrant. The motion on Spider-Man himself is not as well conveyed. They were definitely getting their bearings with the first year or two on the book. They start debuting villains such as Doc Ock, like Human Torch appearances, Electro, the Lizard, but these stories were very much one and dones, and they feels like comic books that were designed to be able to wrap up with a neat little bow at the end, is how I would describe this first third. Definitely more old school. We do start getting a little look into Peter Parker's romantic life. Now, Stan Lee can't stay away from this stuff. He absolutely loves to go into the character drama. I am very surprised to say that the main girl that he's dealt with in the first 38 issues of Spider-Man is not Gwen Stacy. It's not Mary Jane. Pretty much the entire goddamn series, this entire thing here, focuses on Peter Parker and Betty Bloody Brant. I'm going to admit, I cannot stand these two. I don't know why they were together in the book for as long as they were. Pretty much the whole entire thing. Look at that. Look how much page there is. And it's like half dedicated to Spider-Man, half dedicated to Peter Parker's failing love life with Betty Brant. I can't stand it. I really can't. I don't like the way that Stan Lee writes women. I really don't like it. Not because of any kind of like feminist kind of thing. I just find it really annoying. He writes his female characters to be very, very nagging and very annoying to read. We'll have to see how I go with Fantastic Four on the shelf over there with old Sue Storm, but so far, not a fan. Not a fan of his girl characters. I don't think he writes them particularly well, to be honest. Betty Brant is J. Jonah Jameson's secretary and ends up dating Peter Parker. They're the same age, by the way, even though she looks like she's 5-10 years older than him. Starts dating him because he's delivering the pictures to the Daily Bugle, right? But their relationship is just not good. It's just not good. Every second page is dealt with Betty feeling jealous and wondering why Peter's talking to Liz Allen from school. Like, I hate to tell you this, Betty, but when you go to school with people, you kind of have to talk to them. It's not a big deal. Pete's not cheating on you every 5 minutes. It's just school. She is absolutely insufferable, and she actually gets pretty big focus in the story towards like issues like 11, 12-ish. Getting a real focus on that character. And their relationship, I just never felt like really got off the ground and actually got interesting. Every time she was on the page and dealing with Peter Parker, I just knew it was going to be a slog of drama and dialogue and just not fun to read. I was getting through this first third of the book hoping and praying that we were going to see some classic Spider-Man characters finally show up and take me away from these storylines. But alas, not the case. So you jump into the middle third here, and the book actually starts really increasing in quality. The artwork starts getting really nice, the coloring's a little bit more vibrant, you start getting those full-page spreads like we looked at with Mysterio earlier, and the villains, it starts focusing on the Rogues Gallery a lot more. They start building up, you start seeing Green Goblin, Kraven, you start, getting crossovers with other Marvel characters too. This was when Spider-Man was like really, really popular, right? So you start seeing like a Daredevil show up, you start seeing the Hulk show up. It's actually really cool. A lot more Human Torch appearances too. You see the Sinister Six for the first time, which is actually pretty sick. Now, a lot of these villain appearances, it's the first time the villains are showing up. And, it's been 60 years since this right? So we've had so many different interpretations of the Spider-Man mythos. We've got the MCU movies, we've got the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoons, we have the original movies, we have, all the video games and everything that have given like modern interpretations on these villain origin stories, right? Going back and reading the original origins for the villains, they're not as impactful as I would have imagined. Like a lot of them in the first third of the book are just, oh no, villain has had scientific accident. Oh no, the nuclear power. I have to kill Spider-Man. And then in the second third of the book, it's more just like criminal and mob stuff. Like the Green Goblin started out trying to recruit people for a movie set because he wanted to get Spider-Man out of the city? I don't know. It's weird. There's a lot of mob stuff, a lot of gang stuff, which I like seeing Spider-Man deal with, like the petty crime and all that. I think it gives it a very human feel. He doesn't need to be dealing with supervillains all the time. There is one style of villain in this original series that is actually like really, really bad, though. There's two villains actually. First of all, I hate all the bloody robots that are in here. There's so many robot enemies. Hang on, let me count the back of the book. Look at this. Look at this. I'm going to count how many issues focus on robots. 3 of them. 3 of them are just about Spider-Man fighting robots. And if you ask me, that's 3 too many. The other villain that's really, really bad in this series is this group of bloody hooligans. I don't know what the hell they are. The Enforcers. Let me see if I can zoom in on this one cover right here. This one here, the Enforcers, these little goobers that are hanging by Spider-Man right there. These are the absolute worst villains in this entire book, and they show up time and time again. I don't know why Stan Lee and Steve Ditko were so set on using these guys. They are absolute flops, but I mean, you got to pad out the comic with something, right? Anyway, so the middle third of the book actually is much better character drama. The relationships between Pete and all the people at his school, his relationship with Betty and everything, the drama starts increasing. The art gets a lot better. Like I said about those full-page spreads, it's actually very nice to read and very nice to look at. And the dialogue's a little less dated too, I noticed. And then you start moving into the final third of the book, and the final third of the book feels entirely. So look at the bottom third there. Look at all the issues that you got there. This bottom third of the series here feels entirely different to everything else before it. This is like set up for the very basics of Spider-Man mythos. This is like your rogues gallery coming into effect and starting to actually exist in the world. And then this, I don't even know how to describe this. It's like finally the book was focusing on full stories. You start noticing that as these issues tick on, this is like issues 25 and onwards, you start noticing that they start giving credit to Steve Ditko for plotting, and Stan Lee was just taking care of the script. Probably because, Stan was working on so many other books at Marvel as well. He didn't have the time to work out the plot, so they gave it to Steve Ditko. But I started noticing that these started, rather than being individual issues where, problem would happen, problem would finish, all within the one issue, these started being like multi-issue long story arcs. And that was like a big increase in writing quality. I quite liked it. Now, the villains used in this part of the book were nowhere near as interesting. You have the Crime Master, the Molten Man, the Cat Burglar. There was one other guy in a purple outfit who stole stuff. There was a robot, and there was a guy named Joe. Now, these villains are not particularly, there's a Scorpion and Doc Ock and everything in there too, but there was also the best actual storylines that were contained within this omnibus. The storyline here, If This Be My Destiny, leading to the final chapter, was the best part of the entire thing. Bar none. The best part of the omnibus, and it was really genuinely great reading. It was the first time reading this that I actually wanted to read more issues rather than put the book down to go and do something else. You also note that in the final third of the book here, Pete graduates from high school and goes to college, so kind of growing the character up a little bit. He also finally breaks things off with that goddamn Betty Brant. Kicks her to the curb, says goodbye, starts dealing with other people, starts talking to Gwen Stacy and shit. I couldn't be happier. You start noticing other, like, prominent Spider-Man mythos characters show up. Like, finally, you see the face of Norman Osborn in, like, issues 37 or something. You start seeing Harry Osborn. Mary Jane starts entering the picture, although you don't actually see her face in this at all. But she does start showing up. And the drama with Aunt May and her health and sickness and everything starts really ramping up. You know, Peter's issues are, getting real. This final third of the book was much more enjoyable than the first two thirds. I've actually very much enjoyed it. And if it wasn't as good as it was, I probably wouldn't be that keen on continuing the Stan Lee run, because I don't think I like Lee's writing that much. It's very of the time. It's very current and hip in the 1960s, but very dated and very just weird in the current year of 2023. If this final third of the book wasn't as good as it was, I'd probably just not continue reading the series. But this has actually given me a lot of hope that, the rest of the first 120 issues of Spider-Man will be top quality. Now, if you really like old comics, obviously you already know that this is a strong recommend. This is classic. This is the original 60s Spider-Man run. But if you're like me and you mainly collect modern and like 80s, I don't really do 90s stuff, but like 80s, 2000s, 2010s comic stuff, and you want to know whether the original Spider-Man run is worth reading, I will leave it up to how much you can stand old stuff. If you can stand old wording, old lingo, old references to things you've never heard of, then go for it. It's probably worth the buy. I think this is going in circulation now. I'm pretty sure it's in print, so it's like not too expensive. But if you don't really like that old stuff, honestly, I would say just stick with like Spectacular Spider-Man the cartoon, stick with the Spider-Man PS4 game, to be honest, or some other more modern interpretation, because honestly, it's the kind of thing where it's just been done better with time, I will be honest. These are not the best iterations of the characters' introductions, I will be honest with you. They're just a little too old nowadays. There's so much mysterious air around science, and so mysterious science things happen in this, and it's just kind of like, it's kind of old back when people didn't understand things, and, just aged quite badly. I'm going to give the Omnibus a solid, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I know it's not the highest rating, it's because majority of the book is quite aged. The final third was great, it was genuinely great, really enjoyable. I'm gonna see if I can track down the second Omnibus. I hope it's not as big as this one. Not saying I don't want my value for my money on my volume 2, but holy shit, this took me 2 months to read, are you kidding? I only get to read it on my days off from work. Buy a book like this for 120 bucks, takes you 2 months to read. I guess some people would like that. I'd like to get through them a little quicker. I'm going to leave it there on the review. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. I'll catch you next time.